Joe Milton has been touted by Peyton Manning. What does that mean to you, Caleb, if anything? Because I think Peyton obviously wants to be a big part of the university. He's now a professor. And I take what he says with a grain of salt when it comes to Tennessee, because I think he wants things to be great.
Tennessee could hire Ed Orgeron as head coach, and Peyton Manning would say he's the smartest person he's ever been around. I'm just going to be honest. That's Peyton Manning. He is the most diplomatic politician you could ever see. I mean, he's the equivalent. He's the football equivalent of the politician that goes to every small business and you're this nation's backbone. That's Peyton Manning with Tennessee. He has never said a negative word about anything affiliated with Tennessee. So when Peyton Manning touts Joe Milton, I'm sorry. I throw that out the window. Peyton Manning touts everybody. He said Will Levis is an NFL quarterback last year on College Game Day, just so people know.
Well, I mean, he is an NFL quarterback. We'll see how long that lasts. No, I'm with you. I mean, Peyton wants everything to be good. And what's he supposed to say? That Joe Milton was at my camp and he really struggled with accuracy? I don't put a lot of faith in that. And that's not a knock on Peyton. I mean, it's kind of like your wife. If somebody says, "Man, your wife's really tough to get along with," no. I can say that, but you can't say that. And it's kind of the flip. I don't think Peyton Manning's ever going to say something incredibly negative about Tennessee's program. But I don't hate that. And I've said that before, Caleb. It's kind of our job to provide objective insight, as the trailers say. But that's not Peyton Manning's job. Peyton Manning's job is to be a homer for Tennessee, is to run his media company, and I don't blame him for doing that whatsoever. If analyst is a loose term when it comes to Peyton Manning in Tennessee. Now, the Manning cast, he's great, and I'm not saying Peyton lies, but I am saying that you have to take his compliments with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and so I get it, and you're right. I don't blame Peyton, but I think it gives me a greater appreciation for more honest people. Again, back in the day when Richard Sherman used to go off all the time as a player, I loved it because I'm like, everybody got mad at him. I'm like, he's being honest and talking about how he feels on a less vitriolic level. We talked about him yesterday. What if Steve Spurrier ran a quarterback camp? You think Spurrier would lie about any quarterback he coached?
I think, but what he would do is, I don't know, and he would change the subject. So that was his play. He just kind of wouldn't answer it and move on. And I don't think Peyton Manning is lying in any shape, form, or fashion. I think that Peyton Manning is saying, "Hey, look at this guy. Look at this athletic ability. This is incredible. He looked great at the camp." And I guarantee you he did. He's not going to show up and look bad at the camp because there are scouts at that camp. Nowadays, it's gotten to be a real event. And I guarantee you he was put in the right position to look great. And then he shows off the arm throwing it 90 yards, which went viral and all that stuff, or however far he threw it. So, I don't think he's necessarily lying. I wouldn't use that word. I think he's being optimistically hopeful, and that very well could be the case. Let's remember that sports is not a clear-cut thing. At the end of the day, Josh Heupel, who's one of the better offensive minds in college football and maybe all of football, and maybe even proved to be this generation, went with Joe Milton over Hendon Hooker. So mistakes are made in sports. Not everything's cut and dry. The book's not already written.
That was cut and dry. Josh Heupel just made the wrong pick. And I firmly believe that.
No, it was cut and dry, but he made the wrong pick and thought he was making the right pick. Sometimes, and he talked about practice. Sometimes guys are gamers and practice players. Now, I think there's something to be said for Joe Milton was his guy that he brought in. But, Caleb, I think there's sometimes a 60-40. You like this guy more. I don't think it's 100% this guy's the starter. This is the dude.
You are not going to convince me that Heupel just didn't have a bias, and that's why he started Milton, and that Hooker, in my opinion, wasn't better in practice too. It reminds me, I'm just going to be honest with you, Dave. On a way different scale, it reminds me of '05 when Rick Clausen just outperformed Eric Ainge time and time again, but the coaches just wanted Eric Ainge to be the starter more than anything else. And so they gave him every chance to win when it was clear that for that team, Rick Clausen was the better quarterback for that specific team.
Okay, but let me make sure we're on the same page. By the way, hit like and subscribe, and be sure and share if you'd like to as well, or just tell a friend. But here's my point. Let's say Hendon Hooker was 60% to 40% better than Joe Milton. So yes, Josh Heupel's bias works into the whole factor, Caleb, and pushes Joe Milton into the starting role. But again, that's what I'm trying to point out. I don't think it's necessarily always clear cut. So if it's close, who are you going to go with? You're going to go with the guy you brought in and that you like from the get, if it's close. And I think it probably was close before 2021. Close.
I don't know. I can't get past and maybe Heupel is one. It's just what I see in practice, but I can't get past what Michigan fans said about Joe Milton after they lost him and what Virginia Tech fans said about Hendon Hooker after they lost him. Every Virginia Tech fan was on Hendon Hooker's side with his beef with the program. How many times when you lose a player, Dave, how many times when a school's favorite team loses a player, do they side with the player? Nobody at Tennessee sided with Jalen Hurd over Tennessee, even though they probably should have with the Butch Jones saga after he left. But everybody in Virginia Tech sided with Hendon Hooker. And everybody in Michigan was saying, watch out, Joe Milton's going to have issues when he gets on the field. I noticed that vibe then. And I'm like, if the fans from these schools saw it, I can't bring myself to believe Heupel didn't see that too.
Well, I mean, obviously things didn't go well at Michigan for Joe Milton, but Joe Milton does have an awful lot of athletic ability, and that's why they brought him in. And I will tell you right now that I can understand seeing a guy with that much athletic ability and giving him the shot over Hendon Hooker, because that could be the final straw that broke the camel's back in my decision. I get that. I mean, that's a sports car. So if you want to use a NASCAR analysis, you have a Hendrick Motorsports car versus a Wood Brothers car as far as speed and I know you don't get that reference at all.
I don't get it at all. Sorry.
Yeah, one is bigger, faster, stronger, produces faster cars more consistently. Joe Milton throws it bigger, farther, and is bigger and stronger and than Hendon Hooker. So I get that. If it's close at all in camp, you go with the more talented guy. I understand that. I'm not saying it was the right decision. It clearly wasn't.
I'm just going to stick with, I'm not so sure it was that close. I'm not so sure it was that close.
If it was like 80-20 and they went with the guy that they just liked because they recruited him, then that's a big error in judgment. If you're right, then that is Josh Heupel's one major boo-boo at Tennessee.
Because wasn't that 2005? Wasn't Rick Clausen like 80-20 clearly better than Ainge in the offseason that year?
Yeah, they went with the shiny fast car from Hendrick Motorsports.
That didn't have any brakes, probably.
Yeah, well, that didn't have a restrictor plate. But yeah, I mean, I think that you like the big shiny thing, and Eric Ainge was a guy that got the ball out quick, strong arm, and I think it was easy to go with the shiny thing. It's funny you bring that up. I hadn't thought about that, but I think there's a good comparison there. I think that Eric Ainge wasn't ready and Joe Milton wasn't ready or adapted to Tennessee's system in 2001. And Rick Clausen and Hendon Hooker were more ready, especially Clausen. Hendon Hooker, how ready was he in the beginning of 2001? I'm not really sure. 21. Excuse me. 2000. Why do I keep doing that? I keep dropping a couple of centuries there. That's a big deal. So did I mention earlier that I got my first senior citizen discount? Did I mention that? Somebody just lopped on a 10% senior discount. I would rather pay than have the senior discount at this point.